We now return to the first annual Comic Book Issues Awards show. Here's your host, Ricky Gervais.
Hey everyone! Hello! So, comic book issues. What's the one thing more boring than comic books? Watching a fat nerd talk about them, am I right? Comic books, right? The one thing worse than television. At least I'm not charging you $3.99 to watch The Office, right? God, you're all so stupid. $4 for a comic book and it's still got ads inside? So you're essentially paying for commercials. Morons! All of you morons! Am I offending anyone? Am I? It's fine, really, because I keep laughing at my own jokes, so you know it's okay. The only thing stupider than comic books? Religion!
Due to technical difficulties, the rest of the Comic Book Issues Awards show has been canceled, and Ricky Gervais is being taken into an alley and roughed up. We now cut to this previously recorded Top 11 episode. Enjoy the show.
Listen to Vince and John, and all your troubles will be gone. Gonna tell it just for you.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Comic Book Issues. I'm your host, the Last Angry Geek. Now, whenever I'm on the That Guy with the Glasses message boards, one thing I hear from the fans over and over again is that they want to get into comic books, but they feel intimidated by the continuity required. The need to know who's doing what to whom and why. So I figured it was time for another Top 11 list. This is the Top 11 standalone stories. Stories you can just pick up, read, and enjoy. No prior knowledge required except maybe a basic understanding of the characters. For instance, Batman. Batman had a bad childhood and dresses like a flying rodent. The end. Now, before we get into it, there are a few things I want you to keep in mind. For one thing, I didn't review one-shots on this list because I felt it should be actual series or miniseries, at least more than 2 issues. Another thing is there's a real lack of Marvel comics on this list. Now, that's not to say Marvel doesn't do amazing stories. It's just more often than not they take place in ongoing series and the continuity bug comes back to bite them. Plus, unlike DC, who has Elseworlds and Vertigo, Marvel doesn't have a lot of alternate universes to play around with. Most stories take place in the regular Marvel universe, and again, continuity. And before anyone asks, yes, I'm aware of All-Star Superman, I just wasn't that crazy about the series. So no, All-Star Superman is not on this list. I'll just give half my audience a chance to click the red button in the top right corner. Okay, first up is a story I reviewed actually a few months ago, but I was very impressed with. Coming in at number 11, it's DV8, Gods and Monsters.
Gonna tell it just for you.
Now, back in December of 2010, I reviewed this miniseries, so I won't go into too much detail here. Suffice to say that Brian Wood and Rebecca Isaacs took a dead property and relaunched it in a fun and exciting way. 8 kids with superpowers are dropped on a primitive world and begin to influence and be influenced by the warring tribes on that planet. This book was exciting and thought-provoking and should be required reading for anyone who wants to relaunch a stale property. Coming in at number 10 on my list is a classic DC adventure and a template for how to do a good cosmic story. From Jim Starlin and Mike Mignola, The Cosmic Odyssey.
Gonna tell it just for you.
The story starts with the discovery of a comatose new god, Metron. Metron has breached another dimension and discovered anti-life, a force that seeks to enter our universe and enslave all of us. With our universe in peril, Darkseid and Highfather, mortal enemies, declare a truce and form 4 teams of heroes to protect 4 different planets from destruction that will lead to anti-life entering our dimension. Among these heroes are Superman, Batman, and Green Lantern John Stewart. It's a race to save all life with surprising appearances, betrayals, triumphs, and crippling failures. This miniseries was rare in that it had a major effect on ongoing continuity in an era well before event crossovers occurred. One hero is forever scarred when his arrogance dooms a planet, and when another hero dies, Batman's reaction to a third hero's indifference is one of the most emotional moments in comics. Jim Starlin wrote this miniseries that was part action movie and part sci-fi masterpiece. Pencils by Mike Mignola prove that this man's art doesn't get better with time. His style might change, but he was always awesome.
Hey, how do you define cool? I mean, everyone has their own definition, but for me, Han Solo. A cocky SOB with a heart of gold. Of course, Lando's cool too, a smooth MFer with an eye for the ladies. Oh my, yes. So take these two cool guys, surround them with bounty hunters, including the silently cool Boba Fett. Set in a race for a priceless artifact, all set before A New Hope, and suddenly the word prequel isn't dirty anymore. Coming in at number 9 by Mike Kennedy and the late Carlos Meglia, it's Star Wars Underworld, the Yavin Vasilika.
This story starts out with a bet between Jabba and two of his Hutt colleagues on the best way to achieve their goals. Manipulate your pawns, be forthright and honest with them, or just use overwhelming brutality on your enemies. The Hutts agree to a contest. Each Hutt hires his own team of 3 competitors, and the first team to find the ancient orb, the Yavin Vasilika, is the winner. Thus, both Han Solo and Lando Calrissian get hired by Jabba without the other knowing. But who is the third contractor for Jabba's team? Greedo? Chewbacca himself? Or even the mysterious Joselle? With numerous double crosses and surprises in each issue, Underworld reads like a cross between Rat Race and Ocean's 11. The late Carlos Meglia provided the art for his longtime collaborator, Mike Kennedy. It might be too cartoonish for some to enjoy, but in my mind it only heightens the absurdity of the story. Now there is something you should know. Han and Jabba make frequent references to a failed smuggling run that's ostracized Han from the smuggling community. And in the final issue, a girl named Bria shows up. That character and the smuggling raid are from A.C. Crispin's Han Solo book trilogy. I know I said I was trying to avoid continuity, but I figured since it's not actually comic book continuity, I can give Underworld a bye. This story is too good not to read.
Hey, what was hard about this one wasn't choosing a story, it was narrowing it down to only one. Astro City is simply put one of the best superhero comic books on the market today, and I've yet to read a bad issue. For a long time I was going to feature the story Confession, but in the end, despite a few flaws, I'm going with this story by the regular creative team of Kurt Busiek and Brett Anderson. It's Astro City, Tarnished Angel.
Tarnished Angel tells the story of Carl Donowitz, aka Steeljack, a man who grew up in the slums of Astro City and eventually had his flesh turned to metal before turning to a life of crime. After 20 years in prison, Carl is paroled. He returns to his home of Kiefer Square, where many small-time supervillains and their families live. Steeljack tries to rehabilitate himself, but when you can't hide that you're a former supervillain, Carl finds the world outside won't let him reform. But when villains start turning up dead, the citizens of Kiefer Square turn to him to try and stop anyone else from dying. Steeljack visits with other villains and even fallen heroes, all the while learning that we are all masters of our fates. If this story has one flaw, it's that the action stops in the middle to tell the story of a villain called the Mock Turtle, who just ends up being a footnote in the story. It would have been fine as a solo tale, but ultimately doesn't bring much to Tarnished Angel. Still, Busiek's script is brilliant as we genuinely feel Carl's desperation and torment at times. The covers by Alex Ross are gorgeous, and Brett Anderson's interior art has a rough-hewn, unpolished quality that makes Astro City feel real somehow.
Okay, you've probably seen the movie, but have you read the comic? This is a textbook example of noir, with a selfless, hard-boiled hero, a beautiful woman in trouble, and a despicable villain. It's our trip to Frank Miller's Sin City, That Yellow Bastard.
John Hartigan is one of Basin City's few good cops. He saves the life of Nancy Callahan from a pedophile and murderer, who also happens to be the son of a powerful senator. Hartigan goes to jail for the son's crimes and does time hated by everyone he ever knew, except for Nancy, who writes to him, his only link to the outside world. When Nancy's letters stop coming one day and Hartigan is delivered the finger of a young woman, he fears that Nancy's been found by his enemies. He leaves prison, finds her, and together they have to avoid the deformed monster following them, that yellow bastard. Now this segment of the Sin City movie is extremely faithful to the comic book.
Except, of course, in the comic, Nancy is a topless dancer. Jessica Alba, you are a hack!
But whether you've seen the movie or not, the art in the book, including its stunning use, or lack of use, of colors, deserves a look. The story itself is a must-read, as it examines, in every way, what it means to truly love someone, and what one man will sacrifice for that love.
Wondering where the hell Bone is? Well, again, I just didn't like it that much. It's a nice fantasy, good, not great. But I haven't forgotten about Jeff Smith, as he did easily the best take on Captain Marvel that I ever read. A story rife with equal parts action, fantasy, and genuine emotion. At number 6, Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil.
Gonna tell it just for you.
Billy Batson is a poor child living on the streets. Aside from his senior friend, Talkie, he has no one to look after him, and is regularly abused by the older delinquents in his neighborhood. But one day he follows a mysterious man aboard a red and gold train, and finds himself in the cave of the Wizard. The Wizard imbues Billy with great power, and Billy finds himself as the new host of Captain Marvel.
You know, this didn't work out so well when I tried invoking Thor's name during my Avengers Prime review, but, oh, what the hell. Shazam! Oh, man.
Using these new powers for good, Billy eventually learns he has a long-lost sister named Mary. But a mistake on Billy's part allows a dark evil into this world, in the form of the Monster Society of Evil and their leader, Mr. Mind. Billy and Mary are reunited and find themselves dealing with Ifrits, giant monsters, and the evil Dr. Savannah. Jeff Smith's art retains a sort of simplicity and innocence that benefits Captain Marvel's world, but also conveys real emotion. When Mary is telling Billy about the emotional abuse she suffered at her foster mother's hands, the children's actions feel extremely authentic and genuine. You really feel like that's how kids would act. And if there's a message behind this wonderful fantasy story, it's that too often children suffer at the hands of adults. Deeper interpretations aside, Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil is about as fun as a comic book can be.
If anyone at DC is listening, please, absolute edition this book. It deserves a much better presentation than the plain old trade paperback that's currently out there. Moving on. As I've said, I didn't like All-Star Superman. I think Grant Morrison is a good comic book writer, he's just not a good superhero comic book writer. That is to say, for some reason, whenever he gets bogged down with capes and villains, it always seems to go wrong. But I will make it up to him and his regular penciler, Frank Whiteley, by choosing their awesome miniseries, We 3, as my number 5 pick. Think of it as a Disney animal film like Homeward Bound, if it were directed by David Cronenberg.
Gonna tell it just for you.
We 3 is the name of a government-sponsored black ops team of cyborgs. The only catch? They're all animals. 1 is a dog, the group's tank. 2 is a cat, the group's stealth assassin. And 3 is a rabbit designed to deposit mines and poisonous gas. When it's decided that the prototypes are to be decommissioned, their sympathetic creator sets them free. With the government hunting them, 3 animals who have been turned into killing machines begin to search for a mythical land, a place they've never known, called home. We 3 is brutally violent in many ways, but that same violence has a beauty to it, thanks in no small part to Morrison's frequent collaborator, Frank Whiteley. But as inhuman as We 3 have become, you'll find yourselves moved by their journey. You'll be impressed by the loyalty they show each other, and feel their desperation to find their place in a world that no longer wants them.
Now, We 3 was originally intended to be released as an absolute edition. You know, the oversized hardcovers and slipcases with lots of extras. Now, I'm not sure what happened, but the absolute is not happening. Instead, we have an oversized hardcover coming out with new pages by Morrison and Whiteley in late June. I guess the difference is this edition won't have the slipcase.
There are a lot of messages in We 3, messages about animal testing and war, but the one I found resonated the most with me was, we're all looking to feel accepted and safe, man and animal.
Now, there's a lot of serious titles here, but sometimes the best stories are funny ones. Even better are the funny ones that still manage to have serious moments that convey heart. At number 4, it's a little-known series that came out during the 90s by well-known illustrator Phil Foglio. A sci-fi comedy with shades of film noir. Number 4 on my top 11 list is Buck Godot, the Gallimaufry.
Gonna tell it just for you.
In the distant future of Earth, in the city of New Hong Kong, lives Buck Godot. Buck is a Hoffmanite, a species of human that comes from a very high-gravity world, so he's really dense. I mean really dense. But don't let that fool you, because this private eye is one of the sharpest, most observant minds around, always outthinking his enemies rather than beating them up with his tremendous strength. A series of unfortunate circumstances land Buck in the employ of his old friend Lou, brothel owner of the Velvet Fist, as she heads out to see why one of her franchised brothels is no longer bringing in a profit. This takes them to the Gallimaufry, a sort of intergalactic United Nations space station where all species are represented and work out intergalactic law. But Buck soon finds his plate full when it's revealed that humanity is the guardian of the Winslow, an immortal, indestructible being that figures in over 75% of the galaxy's religions. And when the Winslow is kidnapped, it's up to Buck to save the day. Toss in a garbage system with no garbage, a ninja cat, an unscrupulous tabloid investigator, and a plot to wipe out humanity, and you'll join Buck for the ride of your life. This book is known for its humor, but it also has a serious side where Buck has to deal with life or death situations, and sometimes death wins. The story is as funny as it is exciting, and one of those good stories that I reread at least once a year. All of Buck's adventures, including the Gallimaufry, have been posted to the website zapgunforhire.com. Bill Foglio, the writer and artist, even had the formerly black and white book colored. Now, you can read it for free, but I'm hoping that sooner rather than later we'll be able to get a trade paperback of this, one of my all-time favorite stories.
Hey, what can I say? We all knew Alan Moore was going to be on here sooner or later. Whether he's working in mainstream comic book universes, crafting his own bizarre tales, or just plain telling anyone who will listen to take his name off whatever movie adaptation of his comics is being planned, Alan Moore is a game changer. At number 3, his most famous, and I think best work, the superhero noir thriller, Watchmen.
Gonna tell it, sell it just for you.
I'm sure many of you know the story behind Watchmen. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons were originally set to do a miniseries starring the newly acquired Charlton characters for DC. But when DC pulled those characters out, Captain Atom became Dr. Manhattan. The Blue Beetle became Owlman. The Question became Rorschach, and a modern classic was born. In a world of vigilantes, things are thrown for a loop when a being with actual superpowers is born, Dr. Manhattan. With the Cold War going on and on, superheroes are forced underground or into retirement. But when one of their own, the Comedian, is murdered, it sets off a murder investigation by Rorschach that threatens to topple an entire house of cards that could result in either world peace or world destruction. And just when you think you've got all the answers, the villain changes the questions. Whenever anyone mentions classics, must-reads, and comic books in the same breath, you can bet the next word out of their mouth will be Watchmen.
You know, I think Jeff Loeb needs a little bit of redemption. For some reason, his work on TV's Heroes and his latest work at Marvel Comics has been considered below par. And I know he's a great writer. Case in point, he's written one of the best Batman comics of all time. It's a year-one tale that shows how Gotham City changed hands from the mobsters to the super freaks. At number 2, by Jeff Loeb and his longtime collaborator Tim Sale, it's Batman, The Long Halloween.
Gonna tell it, sell it just for you.
We begin with the Falcone crime family dominant in Gotham City as a young Batman teams up with police detective Gordon and a prosecutor Harvey Dent to try and take down the mob. The Don, Carmine Falcone, turns to freaks like the Joker and the Riddler to deal with Batman and his other problems. But as this is happening, his own family is ripped apart each month by a serial killer called Holiday. Batman's year-long search for Holiday is the essence of the character. At heart, he's not a superhero, he's not a crime fighter, he's a detective. Tim Sale's gorgeous art is stylistic and reminiscent of what Frank Miller does, while being able to stand on its own. Jeff Loeb writes a mystery that will leave you guessing as to Holiday's identity up until the very last page. And it's had an effect shaping modern takes on the Batman. The line in The Dark Knight, "I believe in Harvey Dent," is a quote from the last line in this book. Carmine Falcone was one of the major villains in Batman Begins. The Long Halloween was followed by a sequel, Dark Victory, and that had a companion book, Catwoman, When in Rome. So you can think of The Long Halloween as a story that stands on its own, or the beginning of an epic. Either way, it's worth reading.
Hey, you may remember at the start of this I said there weren't very many Marvel Comics stories on this list, and that's true. There's only one. But as a matter of fact, it's number 1. And ironically, it's Marvel doing DC better than DC ever has. It's a testament to late Marvel editor and writer Mark Gruenwald as some very familiar characters take over the world in Squadron Supreme, my number 1 standalone story.
Gonna tell it, sell it just for you.
Created to be an obvious homage to the Justice League of America, the Squadron Supreme were the protectors of an alternate Earth who were drawn into battle with the Avengers. The series finds them having recovered from being the pawns of a supervillain who mind-controlled them and forced them to take over the United States. With their enemy defeated, they find the world on the verge of collapse and do the unthinkable. They assume control of the world in order to save it. With only Nighthawk, the former president of the United States and founding member of the Squadron, decrying their efforts, the Squadron moves forward with their Utopia program. But what starts as a good idea like ending world hunger and creating jobs soon enters gray areas like destroying all guns, and finally violating human rights by mind-wiping criminals so they can no longer commit crimes. Meanwhile, Nighthawk builds up a small resistance of supercriminals to eventually challenge the Squadron. What really works about this story is the fact that the characters are based on the Justice League. Hyperion is based on Superman. He comes from another dimension and has amazing powers. Power Princess is based on Wonder Woman. She's from an island society of immortal female warriors. Nuke is based on Firestorm. Whizzer is the Flash. Hexana is Zatanna, etc. Because we know the characters they're based on, it feels like we're already familiar with these characters ourselves and thus instantly connect with them. But because they aren't the actual characters, that frees Mark Grunwald, the book's writer, to take them in directions that you could never take the actual Justice League because of continuity concerns. One of the most interesting characters is Tom Thumb. He's a genius inventor that seeks to improve the world, but because of his height, he has a massive inferiority complex that often leads him to overcompensating. Despite his good heart, he never really sees himself as the Squadron's equals, in part because of some patronizing behavior he takes from some of the more juvenile members. This leads him to make a mistake in promising to help another member, which in turn leads to the team starting to unravel. And just so we're clear, for every comic that says, we're gonna be proactive, it almost never works and the stories are usually subpar. But with Squadron Supreme, it works, again because these characters are not part of the normal Marvel universe, they're freed from expectations. Every proactive book that followed this one all followed Mark's brilliant take on superheroes ruling the world. If there's one flaw, it's that I feel the characters never should have been revisited, but the Squadron did return in Avengers, they just lacked the same emotional punch as before. Also, Joe Michael Straczynski tried to reinvent the wheel with a mature reimagining in Supreme Power. And it worked, up until the book was watered down and repackaged in an all-ages version of Squadron Supreme. Some stories just don't need sequels. But if you only have the time to read 12 comic book issues in your entire lifetime, read Squadron Supreme.
Okay, friends, that's it. 11 great stories you can just pick up, read, and enjoy. And I hope you've enjoyed this latest episode. I'm the Last Angry Geek, and I'll catch you next time here on Comic Book Issues.
Shazam! Whoa. So this is what it's like to feel scrawny and Indian.